Hi, this is Terry with the Des Moines, Iowa User Group. Today we had our Advanced Admin Study Group. We just wrapped it up, and our topics today are all on the Service Cloud side. This is 10% of the exam, and we talked about knowledge. We talked about Salesforce entitlements, and then we talked about the interaction that happens between agents and the customer through the use of the console and the various different options that are available there as well. If you're studying for the exam, I hope you find these videos to be helpful to you. Thanks for watching, and we will see you again next week. All right, everybody, welcome. This is the Advanced Admin Study Group, week something. I don't know which week this is, but we are hitting the Service Cloud applications this week. It's the Salesforce Knowledge, Entitlements, Customer Agent Interaction Tools. And Meredith, I believe you are our first presenter with Salesforce Knowledge.
Great, sounds good.
So I'll stop sharing and let you take over.
Let me just move my Zoom. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about Salesforce Knowledge and how to manage those article record types and data categories.
And we see your presentation.
Is it in the edit mode?
Yeah. We see your presenter notes.
Okay, let me reshare. Let's see, stop share. I'm going to share screen number 2. Okay. All right, do you see my presentation now?
Yes, I got it.
Okay, great. All right, so there's a lot in here, and I hope I don't go into too much detail. So what is Salesforce Knowledge? It is a library of articles or an organizational repository. So in my research, I found that Salesforce Knowledge was used by agents. So you think about, people inside your company helping those internal customers, but also externally using Experience Cloud, or Community Cloud was the old name, using these self-service sites or partner sites or public websites. And then the reason why you would want to set this up is you're going to reduce that call volume. If customers can help themselves, they're not going to have to call in, as well as internal customers. Then your agents can focus on those complex issues instead of spending that time answering those really simple questions. And then you're going to increase your productivity. So just imagine if you had certain agents that started with a company and they could read these knowledge articles to learn how to support customers. They're not having to sit, you're not going to have 2 agents tied up doing that job shadowing. So you're going to increase productivity that way. And then also just identifying those common issues. You can kind of tie these knowledge articles to cases, so you can answer questions a lot more quickly and identify those common issues when you're trying to maybe look at the roadmap for training as a company. Next topic was the article record types. So, the kind of information that you want to put in knowledge that I read about I did a lot of the trailheads for this. And that was like FAQs, any kind of product manuals, guidelines, procedures, but you can there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of slice and dice your knowledge. And they talk about putting a lot of thought into how your company manages these articles before you go into building, so that you're using the correct categories. Another best practice is to create a record type for each type of information, being that that's going to be related to those page layouts and pick list values. And then the record types are used to structure each type of article, showing the different information with different user profiles, and then workflow and page layouts. So tools available within Knowledge. We have this knowledge import tool, so you can bring in knowledge for articles from another system. I also read a lot about how there's classic knowledge and lightning knowledge. So I focused on lightning since I felt like that's what we would be tested on, but there are some differences that maybe Carla and Terry want to talk about at the end. I didn't get into that too much. There's data category groups. So that's kind of like your main headers. And then within that, you have your data categories. So they said this was used for security and also search filters. So users could search by a certain data category group and only see those data categories under that group. You can use approval processes. So that way, an article, if you have maybe someone who's an agent and they want to write that article, that this is like a common theme that they're seeing and how to solve it, they could submit that and have like maybe a senior manager review it and then approve it to be published. I saw that in my research that channels were referred to in a few ways. One of them was defining these different audiences, like I talked about earlier, so the internal clients versus partners, customers, and the public. But then it was also referred to just for communication channels. So you can use knowledge in a variety of those. I just listed a few: social media, phone, email. There's a thumbs up and thumbs down. So you can create these article rating reports, and that's kind of helps you know if you want to keep using an article. And then improving search. You can improve search through synonyms. So creating synonyms, if you think about like a Google search, similar words, and then promoting search terms to associate keywords with articles that are commonly used. And you can also report on article case metrics. So I think I talked about that earlier, about how that improves your future training. So when it comes to security and kind of designing this, in my research, I found that we talked about readers only. So, kind of coming up with that sort of persona in your brain, as well as, who are those contributors? Maybe the contributors are able to actually read, create, edit, and publish those articles. Then the knowledge admin, they're able to do whatever they want. So you'll have different permissions based on those different personas, and I'll get into that in a second. One other thing is that in order to use knowledge, you have to have the new knowledge user checkbox checked on your user record. So there were so many different app permissions, and I did a trailhead for this. I highly recommend you do the trailhead. The project was really good. It's like the knowledge project. And so they had you create a permission set. And within that permission set, you could assign these app permissions. Then we had our system permissions, which is this manage data categories. And then object permissions. So what you can do with knowledge. So it's kind of unique. I feel like the security around knowledge is a little bit different. Another thing that was interesting is even though knowledge is its own object, you still have this, a lot of the management around it, and creating those categories isn't within the object itself. it's in this data categories section of the survey and over setup. So over here you can see there's active and inactive categories. So when you first build them, you have to activate them. And then within the data category group, you get the categories. You can set that visibility within roles, with permission sets, permission set groups, or profiles. And then category visibility also determines the individual data categories, the categorized articles, and categorized questions. So I think this was one that might be on the test, perhaps. There's 3 types of visibility. So all categories means they're all visible, none, there's no categories are visible, and then custom selected categories are visible. And I have a screenshot of that. Oh, this is the visibility on where you set that. And then that is the within that. So I clicked on this solar installation to set the visibility. And then from there, I could set it how I want. Within managing these articles, you have validation statuses. So you can set your own if you wanted like an in-between status. So that's like whenever you're sending them to be reviewed or published, that kind of thing. And then you can also see the different versions. So I could see that being really helpful. Like at one of my previous companies, we had just we didn't use Knowledge. We used like a SharePoint site to save all of our PDFs, and it was kind of confusing knowing which version we wanted to use. So I could see how this would be helpful. And then finally, the communication channels. So you can make knowledge available through cases. And this was for the project. I was able to attach knowledge to an email whenever I emailed a client through a case. So you can see we just added on the Lightning record page, we added the knowledge component, and then I was able to attach that article really easily. So I think that would be really helpful. And so how am I doing on time, Terry? That's kind of
You're good. Couple things there that I would recommend you understand the terminology quite a bit. There's a lot of different terms that they use in knowledge that understanding what each of those are, whether that's a data category, your record types are important, I think, to know that for sure. Matt, I saw you said that one of the one that Meredith said was she thought could be a question. You said was on one of the practice exams, so that's good. Yeah. One the only thing I don't know that they'll hit you too much on Classic on this, but if they do, I suspect the question would be around what they call article types. Those are now what record types have replaced. So I don't know that you'll get that. Again, I don't have any insider information on what you'll see or not see, but if you do, I suspect that would be one of the main pieces, is because that was a huge change between the Classic and the Lightning knowledge. I think there were some differences too with how files are attached and things like along that line, but I don't think you're going to see too much of that. How many of you, or any of you, using knowledge today? Okay. I would expect to see some questions related to knowledge use in a community as well. I wouldn't be surprised to see some reference to the use of knowledge in communities. I think Meredith, on this, I think it was the data categories. I get confused still too on some of the terminology. I think it's the data category screen that you had specifically up on one of your slides. That is very relevant to how things are shown, what is visible on the community side as well. So that that would be one that I would explore a little bit as well. Cool. Any questions people have on knowledge that now that Carla's back, she can answer for us?
Do my best.
All we can do.
One comment on knowledge that I saw on Trailhead, so not doing it actually, is converting from Classic to Lightning. There is a tool to help you with that. So that's also covered in Trailhead. If any of you have to deal with that with one of your clients, it can be tricky.
Yeah, it can be. And loading articles into knowledge is not a pleasant experience either if you've got a lot of them. Yeah, good. Excellent. Any other questions on that? If not, well done, Meredith. Then we'll send it over to Patrick. Patrick has, is it entitlements?
That is what I got. Hopefully that was the right one.
It is.
All right. Can you guys see my screen all right? Start at the beginning.
Yeah.
How about that? Cool. All right. So service entitlements and entitlement processes. This was a new one for me. So it was fun to, well, I guess kind of a new one. I've used it before, but a good refresher, I suppose. So I'm going to start really basic on just entitlement management overall. So entitlements, main definition there is to help enforce service level agreements within your organization. So service level agreement essentially spells out what level of service you've promised your customers. So the really good example that I think we're all familiar with here is Salesforce Premier Support versus just the regular out-of-the-box support. So if you upgrade, pay for Premier Support, that's your SLA. You get a different level of service experience than if you don't and just have Salesforce's normal support level. And then entitlements just tell your support team what level of service each customer is entitled to. So if I'm a service agent, as I'm looking at the account or the account's popping up, my entitlement is going to indicate on my record what service that I'm supposed to get from there. So basic way to explain this and walk through it a little bit. I thought this chart and these steps are really good. So first step, you create your entitlement that entitles a particular account to phone support. So then you assign that entitlement to an account. So let's say a contact from that account calls in, talks to a support agent with a question. So that's step 2. And step 3, that support agent looks up the account and sees it has an active phone support entitlement. So, all right, they have support. I can go ahead and answer this question. So then in step 4, you see there that they are service agent answers the question if needed and creates a case from the entitlement. So that's the general basic easy flow of entitlements in Salesforce. So getting started with, someone have a question? No? All right. So basic setup and I guess some housekeeping things on entitlements, getting them set up. So it is something that you have to activate in your org. So under setup, if you just do the quick find and search for entitlements, you'll see it there under entitled management settings, and you have to enable from there. So check the checkbox and click save. Once you do that, there's just some other basic things you have to do. So field level security, so an entitlement name field gets created under the case object. A milestone feed tracker you can add to your case feed. Adding entitlement templates to the product related list on the page layout, and then adding entitlements to the related list on the page and asset layout. So some basic things you just got to do once you first get entitlements activated within your org. And then there's also some permissions to know about. So as I mentioned, entitlements have their own object. When that gets enabled, it's its own object. So you can go to the tabs and search for that. So you give permissions, read, write, edit, create, like you do any other object in Salesforce. And then a couple unique permissions within these to something called entitlements, which I'll touch on. So to add those, you need this permission called customize application, manage entitlement permission, and then to set up entitlements, including all the other things you need to manage entitlement permission. I will pause there for a second, see if there's any questions before I jump into how to create these and begin diving into the Salesforce specific things. Everyone all good? All right, so talked a lot about the entitlement so far. So how do we create it? So, and I guess assigned it out. So you can see in that screenshot below, that's generally what an entitlement looks like when you go in and create a new one. So an example of an entitlement is an SLA that entitles them to one year of web support. So you can go in, create, my entitlement name would be maybe that web support for 1 year. You have a type that you can add, an active, start date, end date, whatever it may be, but then you also assign to an account. So each entitlement is assigned out to a specific account. So I could have many different entitlements, different levels of service for each account. So then it's on my account record and I can see that when I go look up and pull up that account. And then once you activate entitlement tab, that tab is enabled, as I mentioned, just like any other object. Now, I'm sure all of us are thinking that can get really, that can be a lot when you have thousands of accounts and having to create every single one of those and assign out to customers individually. So that's where this fun thing called entitlement templates come into play. So let's say you have an entitlement that has the same settings for many customers or the same product. So the example here is we have this product that we know is difficult to use. There's going to be a lot of questions on it within the first year. So we want anyone who purchases this specific product to get the same entitlement or get a level of support. So in this case, we'll just say 1 year of phone support. So you go in and create the entitlement template. It looks just like you would a normal entitlement, but instead of assigning out to an account, we now assign it out to a product in Salesforce. So this entitlement is attached to this product. Wherever that product goes, this entitlement goes. So when a user then or a customer purchases that product, that an asset record is created with that product attached, and that when that product is attached to the asset, now that asset is assigned out to the customer, giving them the entitlement. So it's a little bit of a multi-step from entitlements on the product's on the asset, and the account's on the asset. So you're stepping up, but that is how then that product's entitlement automatically gets assigned to that customer and forever for however long that you have it set for. So that's a way where you don't have to create an individual entitlement every single time that product's bought, but you can use the entitlement template to do so. All right, so now moving on from entitlement templates to entitlement processes. And I think this is what's the trickiest part of this section is understanding what each one means and really the vocabulary under it. So entitlement process comes into play because not every service level agreement is as easy as those laid out. Sometimes they can be a little bit more complicated. So this example, we want this high priority case, it has to be closed within 24 hours. Agents must respond to customer comments within 4 hours. So it's where you're getting multi-step, adding criteria. We want to use this entitlement process. So the Salesforce definition of entitlement process is to enforce time-dependent support. And then we customize these timelines and all these steps using milestones in Salesforce. So I thought this was a really good graphic before jumping in of just how you set up an entitlement process and then how we utilize those. So first thing you're going to do is create a milestone. I'm going to walk through these 4 steps right after this. So you create the milestone. Step 2 is we're going to go in and create our entitlement process. So example, standard support process. Then after we do that, our third step is we have to take that milestone we created and add it to the entitlement process. So maybe that's high priority cases have to be resolved in 24 hours. So we want to say for all of our standard phone support, we want to assign that milestone to that. And then finally, step 4, you can add the workflow. You can add workflow actions to a milestone. So you see the examples there. Email case owner, 2 hours before target date. You can do the updating fields, anything that you can do in the workflow action. So that's how you set them up. And then when we look into using them, so we apply the entitlements process to a customer's entitlement. So that standard 1-year support, now we just assign this entitlement process instead of just a basic, hey, you have the 1-year support. Now this is our standard phone support with this different criteria, different timing based on different things. And then you can have a premier one additional to that. And then to really utilize it, and when you see it into effect, it's created a case from that entitlement, triggering any time sensitive things that we have there. So that's the very 10,000 foot view of this. And then I'll dive in a little bit deeper on this. So these milestones, which are these support steps that we have. So an example I'm going to walk through is all high priority cases must be closed within 4 hours. Any other case has to be closed within 24 hours. So you see in a screenshot, this is what it looks like to set up a milestone. So you give it a name, a description, and then a recurrence type. So our 3 options under recurrence type are no recurrence. So it will only occur once per case. So that's something like priority set to high, 4 hours, we're done. Independent, occur whenever the milestone criteria are met on the case. So we can use the same high priority example. That would be maybe, or we'll use a status. So maybe there is something where we want to escalate this to a manager. So if I change my status to escalate to manager, it kicks off that milestone. If it unescalates and then I need to escalate again, all within the same case, then that milestone starts back over. So we can have reoccurring things under the same process there. And sequential occurs on repeat when the milestone criteria are met. So this would be it. The milestone can happen, the criteria could be met again, and maybe the first one hasn't ended yet, but it'll just keep on going. So it doesn't necessarily have to be closed on those. So that's our step 1 in these entitlement processes is we create our milestone. Now we go in and create our entitlement process. So once we create this is how we loop in those milestones, and then we add to our customers eventually. And you just see on the right there, the basic stuff there. So you give it a name, activate it, but we don't want to activate it yet until the very end. We're done doing things. And then you have some advanced options there as well. So this is our framework. It's very similar to assignment rules where you have your rule and then you add criteria to it. So we have our entitlement process where we're going to add rules to this. So adding a milestone to the entitlement process. So now we have our milestone created, our entitlement process created, and we just need to add milestones or these steps to process as when this entitlement is assigned to a case. So the big things that we have to enter here, we set a time trigger in minutes for how long they have to resolve the case. So that would be that 4 hours or 24 hours. We set an order number. So we want this to be the first step, second, third, just like we do in assignment rules. And then set criteria. So in that screenshot, you have the priority equals high there. And then we click save. That'd be the first one. And then we can keep doing this on repeat for the different milestones that we want to add or different steps we want this entitlement or SLA to go through. And then finally is the ability to add these milestone actions. So this ability to add a milestone workflow action. So tasks, emails, updates, whatever it may be, you can add those. So when that entitlement runs, it does something. Pause there before I have some questions or I guess some practice questions. Any questions things need to go slower. I know I kind of zoomed through that before we jump in. Take silence as no. All right. So as I mentioned before, I think the vocabulary is what makes this confusing. When I've worked with it, I remember my head just spinning, trying to remember what everything was. So have some vocabulary and matching the definitions here. So I guess I'll open it up to everybody. Milestone. Who remembers the definition of the milestone?
That'd be required time-dependent steps in your support process, number 3.
Exactly. Thank you, George. All right, entitlement. Who remembers what an entitlement is?
That'd be predefined terms of support that users can add to the product. Would it be maybe the kind of support? Yeah. Customer how to,
Yeah, it's the kind of support. So that's the lowest level, I guess, of just I have phone support or I have the email support. Entitlement process.
Number 1.
Entitlement process is the timeline support agents give that need to be completed in order. And number 1 is going to be entitlement template and then 5 milestone action. This is what I mean. It's really confusing, especially when you have 3 things that have entitlement in their name. So I would guess on the test, that's going to be the big thing, is making sure you know the difference between that entitlement process, entitlement template. They all sound the same, but they all are a little bit different there. Any questions there? And I got 2 multiple choice questions. So first one, what object do you add those entitlement templates to? So reminder, the entitlement template is a reoccurring entitlement, so 1 year phone support that I want to add to many customers.
D.
products.
Got it. Yep. D, products. Products get assets. Assets go to the account. How's that? And then question 2, what's the first step before setting up entitlements?
You have to enable it. B, bravo.
Nailed it. Good job. That is all.
Question for you, Patrick, on
Yeah.
question number 1 that you had.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Yeah, question 2. No,
Yes.
So the other one that's in between these two.
This one.
Yeah. So the asset gets created with the entitlements associated to that. So let's say I call in and I want support, and the case is created.
Yep.
Do we have to add that asset to the case, or how does that entitlement get kicked in for that asset that I'm calling in about?
I believe that from the asset, that entitlement's attached, and when you add your account to that asset, then it's associated with that account. But you might have to start that case from the asset, now that I'm thinking about it.
Or link the asset to the case.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah.
Because your entitlements is going to kick in from the case perspective.
Because you could have many products that have different entitlements, so you probably have to define the product there.
Yeah.
On that.
Yeah, so I think your asset needs to be linked to that.
Yep.
To the case. Does that sound right, Carla, from what you've seen too? Or am I leading us astray?
No, I think that's right.
I think that's correct too.
Yeah, sounds right.
It's been a while.
I know it has been for me too.
This one's a mind twister.
Well, and It's really the kind of the intent on this particular exam. I think specifically, it's to test those things that we don't have a whole lot of familiarity with sometimes. And, there are some definite nuances to both knowledge and entitlements. And so, yeah, terminology, I think, is going to be your key to having success in these two areas. Both, or this whole section today is like 10% of our exam. So you'll probably see about 6 questions on this topic, would be my guess. So
One thing to keep in mind too, I wanted to call out, I think, is sometimes like the dependencies. So you have to have maybe an entitlement before you have a process or before you have a template. Like you kind of have to know in the order in which you have to have things created so that you can link everything together correctly. I think sometimes the nuances of those Salesforce exam questions are, you have to have this before you can have this. So just keeping that in mind,
I could see a question on the sequencing of like the entitlement process. You got to create the milestone first, and how to sequence all of that. Like, what can you have to do before you activate it?
Yes, exactly.
Select 3, some of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's where going back to the understanding the vocabulary could save your butt on those.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. This is George. 2 other things that I'm thinking about as I'm preparing for the exam, that the business hours are flexible. You can adjust those, right? So they could be 24/7, or you have them be the normal. Okay, they call that Friday at 4. We stop at 5, and the milestone stops, and then it picks up on Monday at 8. So that level of nuance, knowing that you get to figure that. And then the other one is the limitations, because you're using workflow with the milestone. So you can only do automatically what workflow can do. So that's your update, that's your outbound message, that's your create a task. So that could cause you to say, well, you know what, we need to do a process builder or a flow or something else, because in this case, I don't know if they'd go there, but that's another limitation.
Yeah, I think understanding the business hours will be important, because I would almost guarantee you're going to have a question related to that topic, and those business hours can be different. Because I believe, Patrick, tell me if I'm wrong there, but when you're creating those milestones, aren't you associating your business hours to those? That's what I was thinking. That's where it was. And so if you're an international organization, your business hours may be different than another part of your organization. And so you've got to watch that. I could see weekends coming into that mix. What happens when the weekend occurs, if you're supposed to respond in 24 hours, what's, how, all of that sort of thing plays into those business hours.
That's on the entitlement.
Holiday hours.
It's on the entitlement process, not the milestone. So
entitlement process.
When it's going to fire, you set your hours for that one to fire.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yes.
Holidays play into that as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. We're going to wing the next topic. And so this is going to be kind of a bank. Hopefully Carla and I can kind of help cover it, but this is the customer agents and interactions. And what I'm thinking most everything related to this topic, in fact, knowledge is in this same section of training, but channel, I think, is something that you're going to want to be familiar with from a terminology standpoint. That's what allows us to route work requests to the most available and most qualified agent in the console. And so I'm familiar definitely with that particular term. It's one that threw me off forever. It took me a long time to figure out what the heck is omnichannel. Be familiar with that one, and how it's different than just say typical assignment roles or things along that line as far as your cases are going. I think the key piece here is most available and most qualified agent.
Yep.
Anything there, Carla, that you wanted to add?
No, I agree. I just think knowing
Okay, sorry.
like what it is and high level how it works.
Yeah. Einstein case routing was something that I have not explored this one too much. Sounds like it's kind of similar, in that it's automatically updating and routing new cases as well. So I don't know if that's going to be on the exam, but again, it's probably something that I would at least have a high level familiarity with. I'll throw this to the chat just so that you have it, because I think there's a section on from an exam perspective, probably about everything that you're going to need to know is in this in particular of the help and training. The other section here that I think for the channels, and Meredith, you kind of hit on channels as a definition when you were talking about knowledge. Think of channels as the methods in which people might reach out to you using. Come in through phone support or through, just by calling up. It could be web, emails, chat. I would anticipate there being some question related, at least one related to that. And so again, that's one that I would spend a little bit of time. These are fairly quick reads. If you go through, I know that you have to go through the actual setup of it, but if you get the definitions down as to what they are, know which options are available, so that they don't throw you by tossing something in and you're looking at that thing, I don't think that's a real thing, or at least it's not real in this context.
Right.
Then I think you'll do okay.
Terry, is this the chat? Is that Live Agent? Is that the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay, Live Agent was listed in the list in the study guide.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I actually looked it up
that too, and
yeah, Live Agent, I couldn't find it in Trailhead.
I wondered if they rebranded it like they have
I think so.
half a dozen other things.
I think it's web
because
chat.
it used to be called Live Agent.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure.
Well, and they've got they have Einstein bots now out available too that will try to answer questions on behalf of whatever you happen to type in.
Yeah.
So that's another. I'm trying my chat window. Sorry if it looks like I'm a little crazy. That's why, because I don't see it. Get the link out there here eventually. There it comes.
I just wanted to call that out because it says Live Agent in the study guide, so that could be confusing.
I will tell you, when I was reading through this, I was questioning that very same thing, and so I am wondering if it is just a rebranding. And Live Agent, and I couldn't find evidence of this anywhere in these articles either, but I'm positive Live Agent is an additional license as well. I don't think you get that with Service Cloud for free.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Okay. If it is its own license, I could see that being something to at least be aware of. So the chatting, again, that's I think you're going to want to know that one for sure. Social media, I could see that's become something that's talked about a lot more often now too, where you're listening to social media and creating, bringing that channel into your service console, and the ability for that to create cases and manage that. That one I'm almost positive is an additional license for that one as well. That's really cool. If you've never seen a demo on how that works, that it's really an interesting one to see how that plugs into your service console and interacts with your cases. A phone, I could see having just some basic call center type knowledge and awareness of how the integration with your phone systems might work, especially from a soft phone perspective. I think that would be an area that could potentially have some questions there as well. Trying to think if there's anything else there that might. But that's what I'm thinking when I see that particular topic. Any questions that anybody has on those various ways that you might interact with a customer that you wanted to ask, or anybody have experience with any of them that you could share with the group?
Hey, Terry, this is George. I just did a quick Google search. I'll post in the chat. There's a Salesforce bin article about Live Agent. So that's for your web page.
Yeah, I looked at that too, but that was
Yes,
written
it
in
would
2015. It was written in 2015, so it's older.
Right, but I do remember Trailhead too, where I was using that. So I believe Live Agent is what you're using for your web page. So it's not
Right.
the thing. So it has the whisper message, the sneak peek, those things.
It is. That's the customer facing side of it, but from an agent perspective, it sits inside your console.
Yep.
So when you're on your service console, that's where you're going to interact with it. It's the same way as with that social media. All of those different channels are coming into your help desk or your service center all through the console.
I believe.
Does that make sense?
So you're saying that the Live Agent is not limited just to web. You're saying it would be any way that your customers are contacting.
It's two different sides of it. So you have the customer experience of it, George. So that would be if you go out to, say, Dell.com and you go into their chat.
Yep.
You've got that aspect. That's the customer facing piece that could be living on your website. But from a service agent perspective, you're going to be responding to that customer using the service console. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, that makes sense. What I'm saying is, but that's the only channel that the customer is on. In other words, the customer isn't sending you a text message. The customer is not on a phone. The text message, Live Agent is just interacting with people on your web.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yes, that would be true.
Jude, I think, just sent a link, and I opened that up. It looks like Live Agent routing is only classic, and you have to.
Live Agent's the old one. They just they kind of rebranded it and built around it for Lightning. So
That's
Omnichannel is just a robust Live Agent.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent.
I think this is a good resource to know the difference between the two.
Yeah, very good. We are always better together. Thanks for that. That's awesome. Anyone else have any experience or questions around these various ways that a customer could potentially interact with your agents?
Well, this is George again. Jude, just to beat the dead horse one last time, make sure I'm clear, because this is all new to me. So thank you so much. So Live Agent is classic and Omnichannel is Lightning. Is that correct?
Yeah, because I think what they did is they took Live Agent, which is the interaction, and then they built more functionality around it with skills and routing and branded it Omnichannel. It kind of holistically brought all of that interaction together.
That makes
how I understand it.
Right, because Omnichannel now you can say this is how much this agent can take 6 points worth of tasks. This one you can only take 4 points worth of tasks. So you're
depending on inbound chats or whatever you have it set up for.
Thank you, Jude.
You bet.
I was trying to read through that some to see if this is specific to just the chatting, because one of those terms that historically has been one that's confusing. I think that it is. I want to say that omnichannel is broader than just chatting. So I don't know that while it might encompass that, I think it's a bigger topic than just the chat.
Yeah, it's all channels, and it's workload and capacity of your individual agents as you assign, and you can assign the difficulty of the case. So this type of case is a 3, and agents have a capacity of 6, but unless they're new, in which case they only get a capacity of 4. And anyone who's a Spanish speaker goes here. If it's for the iPhone, they go here. If it's for the Apple computer, they go here. It's all of that wrapped into one. But Jude, you're the one who was bringing this up. Anything else?
Where I get confused is where chat interacts with the social tools. That's confusing for me.
Yeah, and I was trying to think if I had any. I don't think I've got anything I can really show on any of that. I've seen demos of this, but
yeah, we have a subsidiary that just started it, and he's loving it.
It's cool. It is. I mean, the demos and things that I've seen on it is just absolutely. It's like, whoa, that's
and
it's pretty impressive.
Pretty seamless.
Yeah,
it works pretty seamless. I mean, he has a Twilio integration, so they leverage that a lot for outbound stuff, which works really well. But all of this social customer interaction, and it's working pretty cool.
Have Social Studio for Marketing Cloud to be able to do this?
Yes, so we went down that path, but is this recorded? Marketing, they were not happy with Marketing Cloud.
Okay.
So they kind of stepped away from that and then went just into the social suite.
You don't have to have Marketing Cloud on your Service Cloud site.
Right.
If that's what your question was, Carla.
Well, my question was the Social Studio. Yeah. I saw that on one of your pages you had open that you had to have Social Studio. So maybe you don't have to have Marketing Cloud to have Social Studio. Maybe they're two separate things. I wasn't sure. Anyway.
That makes me kind of want to look into that a little bit more. I think they are different things.
Yeah.
But
on that page where you had I think like I don't know if it was get started or something that said like Facebook, Twitter, like all the social medias. I don't remember which page that was that you had at the bottom.
I want to say that they don't even have Social Studio.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. I thought I read it there, so I just want to make sure.
I'm trying to think back of how they had it set up, and
maybe it's at the top. What's at the top of that page, Terry? That's what it says. Okay. It doesn't say it there. Maybe I read it wrong.
With all editions of Service Cloud. Yeah,
yep.
I
must have read it wrong.
It's just Service Cloud.
Yeah,
yep.
I think that social customer service is what sounds familiar.
Cool.
Yeah, and what I was hoping to see as I was going through that was just a screenshot of how all of these things come into that service console, just because that's the piece that's really cool, the way that it all lays out within the agent's view, and how they're able to interact, because they aren't sitting in Twitter, or they're not sitting on Facebook, they're sitting all within the console and interacting with things, able to create a case from those interactions, all from inside the console. It's very, very interesting stuff. So yeah, maybe do a YouTube video search or something on that topic, because it might be fun for you. It's probably way more detailed than what you need for the exam, but it's kind of cool to see it. And for me, sometimes that visual helps kind of solidify the idea around what they're trying to help us understand. So worth looking at.